and concrete blocks were hurled at police and buildings were badly damaged. There were injuries to both protesters and police and widespread chaos for commuters. Andrew Simmons reports.
It took the police several hours to gain control as thousands converged on the city. A protest against the world of commerce, and the demonstration became violent. The protesters had broken up into 4 groups, some attacking buildings, causing serious damage. This should be an ordinary Friday night rush hour with stockbrokers and office staff going home for the weekend. Instead, scenes rarely experienced here in the streets of the City of London. Earlier on, a police van had run over a woman. The police said the vehicle had to make a fast getaway because it was under attack. The demonstrator was taken to hospital suffering from a leg injury and concussion. Several other protesters were injured in a series of standoffs, and dozens of police officers were hit by bottles and bricks. The police say around 4,000 had shown up for the demonstration, which had started with good humour. But after a few hours, it had turned violent. Protesters intent on taking it out on the police. And this demonstration, aimed mainly at capitalism, will be remembered for the damage caused and the injuries inflicted to both sides. Andrew Simmons, ITN.
The Telegraph leads on the riots in the City of London today and says they became violent after many of the demonstrators began drinking. The Independent says Russian troops will get their stake in Kosovo by sharing peacekeeping duties with NATO troops. And next to that, a picture of today's protests in the City of London. And those protests dominate the front page of the Express, which says they caused some £5 million worth of damage.
Good evening, and we start with more on the main story of the day, the rioting that brought the capital's financial centre to a standstill. The morning began with a series of peaceful protests against capitalism. Small pockets of demonstrators targeted the city's financial institutions. But by early afternoon, thousands more had joined the crowds and attempted to occupy Liverpool Street station. In other parts of the city, police soon found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of people. At London Wall, what had been a carnival atmosphere soon turned sour, and a female protester was run over by a police van. Meanwhile, more violence was erupting just a short distance away. Demonstrators went to Dowgate Hill, where they attacked the Life building. Angry crowds forced staff to take refuge on upper floors. Riot squads blocked off the entrance and eventually stormed the building. Well, our reporter Ronke Phillips is at the scene of that last riot, the Life building in Dowgate Hill. Ronke, the area is clear now of protesters. What does it look like?
Yeah, well, as you said, the Life building was the scene of the worst demonstrations and the scene of the worst violence. If you look behind me, you can see the entrance to the building has been all but destroyed, and workmen are actually battling to secure the building as I speak. Protesters also targeted a Mercedes dealership a few hundred yards away from here. They broke through the display window and got to at least a dozen cars, causing about £100,000 worth of damage. Dozens of buildings were covered in anti-capitalism type graffiti, and somehow protesters managed to get breeze blocks outside one of the entrances to the Life building, which is also covered in graffiti and banners.
What about the condition of the woman who was injured?
Well, as far as we know, she suffered a broken leg and some internal injuries, but we don't have any confirmation on that at the moment. Earlier I spoke to the Lord Mayor of London about the violence that erupted and led to her being injured.
Unfortunately, this lady was one of the protesters, jumped on top of the police van. The police van tried to reverse. She fell off. She fell under the van. The van, as soon as he realised what had happened, tried to stop. But then the protesters stormed the van, and for a considerable amount of time, and the police have got 3 or 4 independent witnesses who saw this, actually who were lawyers who happened to be around there. They saw that the police couldn't do anything because they were surrounded by this mob. The mob were complaining that the ambulance couldn't get through. They were quite right to complain. But of course the ambulance couldn't get through because the mob were blocking the streets. And you know, this is a most appalling thing. These people who had, as I say, an important message they wanted to put across, some people agree with it, some didn't, but they ruined their position by turning into this mindless violence. The police were there to try and let people have a protest. They didn't want to inflame the situation. I think the police have behaved brilliantly in this whole position. But, you know, with thousands of people crazed running through the streets like that, it's not what people are here for. It's not what people in London want. And I don't believe those people are representative in any way of what the people of London or the City of London are really about, nor what they want.
And have you been told how much the rioting will cost the city?
Well, we don't have a specific figure yet, but we know that the damage runs into hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not $1 million. And of course, we still don't know what it costs to police this event, but we do know that they brought police in, not just from the City of London force, but from the Met as well.
Do you have an update as to the injuries and the arrests?
Yeah, we know that 15 people were arrested, Kate, and that 3 of them are still being detained in hospital. In terms of the injuries, we understand there are 37 people injured. That's including that young girl. I do apologise for the noise behind me. 37 people injured, and we know that maybe one person was also involved in a collision with a car. With that, I think I should hand you back to the studio.
OK, Phillips, many thanks.
Public order offences after yesterday's violent protests in the City of London. All were bailed. Repairs have started on the damage caused when an anti-capitalist demonstration became a running battle with police.
I deeply regret that violence and damage occurred, but I regret to say that much of that was carefully orchestrated and premeditated.
Well, surprise, surprise, the organisers of yesterday's protest have been rather difficult to identify, let alone persuade to speak. But we are able to talk on the phone now to Javier, who describes himself as an activist with Reclaim the Streets. Javier, are you sorry you got involved with this sorry bunch yesterday?
Well, we are not sorry to be involved in all these things that happened yesterday. I think that basically police are trying to blame orchestrated violence, you know, for all this, and we think that the only people that were really organized yesterday were actually the London police. We think that, you know...
So you defend all of that action, all that violence?
We don't defend the violence. We are just saying that the violence yesterday was definitely not organized by Reclaim the Streets. There are many other groups, and it didn't seem organized at all. It just seemed like plainly chaos.
If you were at all sincere about what you're saying, why didn't you go to the police and get involved in organising this demonstration? They said they invited you to, but you turned them down.
Well, basically, Reclaim the Streets is a non-hierarchical organisation. The way that the police works in terms of organising demonstrations means that one person has to sign, and basically there are 2 completely different ways of organisation that I'm afraid that they can work together.
But if you believed in peaceful protest, you would have helped to organise it rather than just aim to cause disruption, which it appears is your aim.
It appears our aim. I'm afraid that that's what you said. Our aim was to organise a carnival against Capitol. Any type of violence that happened afterwards was not our aim at all. We planned symbolic actions like breaking up Futures Exchange, not to basically dismantle it.
All right, Javier, thank you very much.
The city streets quiet today except for the activity of contractors repairing damage and cleaning graffiti. The carnival against capitalism had begun peacefully but turned violent. 100 were hurt, 38 needing hospital treatment. One woman still in hospital tonight with a broken leg after falling under the wheels of this police van. Officers say the violence was caused by a minority intent on creating mayhem. Today they began studying CCTV footage to identify those responsible.
We have CCTV cameras deployed around the city capable of very, very high quality imagery, and we will be using the product of those cameras and our intelligence gathering operation to pursue those responsible for the violence.
Police are also criticising some of the 40 organisations which took part in yesterday's protest, accusing them of willfully failing to cooperate with police in the run-up to the demonstration. Graham Major, Newsroom South East.
And with us now is Councillor Judith Mayhew from the City Corporation. First of all, you've been meeting the police this morning. Was there any concern expressed about the way police handled this demonstration?
Well, quite clearly, after you've had every single anarchist in the country in one place in the City of London, we've had to review what happened completely, and that's what we're doing. Because what we want to do is to learn from our experience and to make sure that if this ever happened again, we were able to deal with it very effectively.
Does that mean you think the police could have cracked down harder earlier?
Well, we are obviously reviewing everything at the moment, and what is really important is that the city didn't stop trading on Friday, and we're back to normal today. That's not to say that it wasn't nasty for some residents who had their property destroyed, and also for some of the city workers, but we are really confident that the city has not been disrupted. And I'd like to pay tribute to all of our people who cleaned up 24 hours a day over the weekend, who are now cleaning down the graffiti, who washed the streets, who did all that wonderful work. And
Judith Mayhew, sorry, we'll have to leave it there. Many thanks indeed for joining us. Back to you in the studio, Tim.
That last Friday's riot in the City of London was plainly premeditated. Jack Straw, the Home Secretary, condemned the organisers of the original demonstration for refusing to cooperate with the police. More details now from Sian Williams, who's in the city. Sian.
Well, it is business as usual here in the City of London after Friday's attack. All that's left, as you can see, a bit of graffiti on the walls, and some of the doorways have been boarded up as well. They're saying that it could have cost about a couple of £1 million here, and they're also saying it could take a couple of weeks for it to be cleared up completely. As we were hearing in the House of Commons, the Home Secretary Jack Straw said he believed the attack was planned, and we're going to be hearing from the Lord Mayor of London, who agrees with Jack Straw, in just a moment. But first, Peter Hunt reports.
3 days on, and the City of London still bears the scars of its violent brush with anti-capitalist demonstrators. Millions of pounds worth of damage has been inflicted on offices and shops in the area. Friday's protest, dubbed a carnival against capitalism, began peacefully but then degenerated. The police were attacked with bricks and bottles, and buildings were ransacked. Almost 50 people were injured. The Home Secretary told the Commons this afternoon it was a wholly deplorable outbreak of violence.
At the moment, I have no firm information to suggest that a recurrence of these demonstrations is likely in the foreseeable future. I intend, however, to hold further consultations with the Commissioner and the police service to ensure that everything possible is done to protect the safety of the public and the businesses in the city and elsewhere in London.
His opposite number, Anne Widdicombe, visiting a city police station, was shown video evidence by Detective Chief Inspector Kieran Sharp, which he believes demonstrates the disturbances were premeditated.
Actually, it's so well organised. Isn't it just? Yeah. Nobody can make that up by finding something on the back of a lorry.
Yes, quite. No, they are very organised.
As repairs in the city are carried out, 60 detectives continue to investigate the unrest. They say they're making very good progress. Peter Hunt, BBC News.
Well, the main focus of the attack was the Life building, or the Futures Exchange. This is where they trade stocks and bonds. And one city dealer told me today the reason why it was targeted on Friday is because there are a lot of wealthy young men who work here. They're called the Jackets. Now, we were hearing from Peter Hunt about that debate that was going on in the House of Commons. As we speak, there's also a debate going on in the House of Lords, and the Lord Mayor, Peter Levine, is taking part in that. Earlier, just before he went to the House, I asked him why he was so sure that it was organised gangs who were responsible for the violence.
The violence started almost at the same time in 3 or 4 different areas. They weren't the people that we saw in the morning who were on bicycles and were, I'm sure, sincere in the cause they were promoting. These were violent people. I was down here, I saw it. There was nothing other than a very carefully organised group who were intent on causing as much damage and as much violence as possible.
Who was the group?
I don't know who the group were. I'm sure they know who they were, and I'm sure that the police have a pretty good idea who they were. I don't think it was one group. I think it was a collection of groups, and they were trying to get in. I mean, they were terrorists. There was nothing of any kind of peaceful protest about this. They were terrorists intent on causing as much damage as possible.
Now, the City of London is one of the largest financial centres in the world, so how can you prevent this sort of thing happening again?
Well, we have a tradition in this country of free speech. If people want to protest, they can protest. But what we don't accept is violence and gratuitous violence. Happily, the City of London was not affected. Trading was normal on Friday, even here in the Futures Exchange. It wasn't affected. It's been normal today. But we will not put up with this kind of thing.
Well, Lord Levine also said that they have suffered an awful lot with the IRA attacks early in the 90s, and also, of course, they were bombed during the Blitz, and they said that the kind of attack that they saw on Friday isn't going to deter people here from business as usual. That's a lot of what people here have been saying to me throughout the day as well, that they're not going to be put off their job by the acts of mindless hooligans. Hugh.
Sian, thanks very much.
The most serious public disorder in the capital for nearly a decade. Police chiefs met leaders of the City Corporation this morning. Afterwards, one senior officer told this programme police would deal more aggressively with any future demonstration. But that, he warned, would mean a greater risk to members of the public. Here's our business correspondent, Brian Milligan.
Even after a frantic weekend of cleaning up, the city still bears the marks of one of the most violent protests it's ever had to cope with. For many, including the traders of the futures market, it was business as usual. For others, the scale of the damage seemed hard to comprehend. But questions are still being asked about whether the police could have handled things better.
Hopefully, if this thing happens again, the police will crack down harder and sooner.
I really don't think they've done enough. They should have expected a lot more.
Trouble flared on Friday when a relatively peaceful protest turned violent. Today, leaders of the City Corporation met the police and told them they could have acted faster to stop the damage. The police say they will do that in future, but such tactics are risky.
We may well, if the conditions are appropriate, be more assertive next time. But I dare say then that there will be a risk. There will be a significant risk to innocent members of the public, to peaceful protesters and to police officers.
In the Commons this afternoon, the Home Secretary said he wholly supported the police tactics and blamed the demonstrators for not discussing the protest in advance.
The perpetrators of the violence, and they alone, are responsible for what ensued. There is no excuse whatever for this kind of violence.
The police are now studying videos from hundreds of security cameras and say they're close to further arrests. Meanwhile, city figures believe financial institutions haven't been unsettled by the riots, although a further demonstration may be planned. Brian Milligan, Newsroom South East in the City.
Well, in our Westminster newsroom now, the leader of the City of London Corporation, Judith Mayhew. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. If you feel the police could have done more on Friday, what exactly?
Well, I think after any incident like this, you have to learn from your experience. We didn't have any contact with these people beforehand, so it was very hard to know exactly what they were going to do. But it soon became apparent it was orchestrated violence. Now, obviously, we're going to learn from that in case it ever happens again.
But if then the police come out fully dressed for a riot and will be more assertive, as they say they will be, it's likely then that anyone who's around could be thumped, isn't it? There will be a greater risk to members of the public.
Well, I don't think that would necessarily happen. It'll be very much down to the police to decide in the circumstances how to police next time round. I mean, I think it's really important to realise that we all pulled together as a team, particularly in the clearing up after this, and no trading was lost at all.
Well, as you say, no trading was lost. What are you really worried about? I mean, about 80% of banks in the city are not British. Are you worried about them moving out?
Well, obviously we have our reputation as the world's biggest international financial centre to protect. We have our residents to protect, and we don't think city workers and city residents should have to put up with this sort of thing.
Well, Judith Mayhew, thank you very much for that.